Okay, so what we actually did last week was about audit planning. Okay, so that is what we did. I told you that this part we dealt with ethics, and you are looking at 20 marks in ethics. By far, I've taught you that you will come across ethical and professional issues or considerations. All right. And I taught you the things that you need to look for under ethics and the things that you need to look for under professional consideration. I hope that one you remember.
Yes, sir.
All right. So that, now, so this part, so you realize that you have 20 marks for this part, which you need to really do justice to. Okay, you don't need to let this one escape you. You need to claim that thing. It's so easy. We've talked about it. And so you have the knowledge and the techniques to deal with those things. Okay. Now, there is another part of your syllabus, and that is the part that we started looking at last week. Okay. And that part embodies audit planning. Okay. It embodies audit planning. Now, the second part is it has audit planning, and risk assessment. And it also has audit evidence and finalization. Okay, and I explained to you that this part is 25 marks. Okay, it's 25 marks. Now, and so last week we dealt with this part of it, the audit planning aspects of it. Now, when we were dealing with this last week, we started by talking about the audit plan in terms of the strategy and the audit plan itself. We went through all those things. And we came to a point where we discussed the risk-based approach of audit. The risk-based approach to auditing. Now, what we said was that the risk-based approach is just the same thing under audit and assurance part 2. Okay. Now, what we said was that it is an approach to audit whereby the auditor focuses on the places where there is likelihood to be risk that will affect the financial statement. And therefore, that is where they will focus their attention on. And that was the risk base. And so we defined audit risk. We actually defined audit risk as the risk of giving a wrong opinion. All right. The risk that the auditor's opinion, auditor's opinion might go wrong. Might go wrong. So that is what we meant by audit risk. And we actually went for to say that audit risk has two components. It has the first part is the risk of material misstatement. Okay, risk of material misstatement. Plus detection risk. plus detection risk. What do we mean by that? We are saying that risk of material misstatement simply means that there is a risk that the company has done something that might affect the financial statement, right? But the auditor could not spot them during a substantive testing. So that one is the detection risk. The auditor not being able to detect or spot it is what we call detection risk. But the risk of material misstatement is for the firm, and so it has two components under it. We have the inherent risk and we have the control risk. Okay, and last week we explained control risk as the risk of material misstatement that is occurring due to the nature of the company and its business transaction. Okay, so here we talked about the nature of the company, and the business transaction. Okay, there are some companies, as because of their size and their nature and the way they transact, there's a likelihood that risk might occur. All right, if they do mainly cash sales, cash businesses, you and I know that there's a likelihood that there will be cash embezzlement. Okay, so that is what we meant by the inherent risk. Okay, and we have the control risk. The control risk is a risk that the inherent risk mentioned here are not prevented or detected by the control systems of the company. So this might be there, the inherent risk might be there, but there must be control processes to check and prevent those risks. Okay, and that is what we meant by the control risk. And this one, basically, we are talking about the internal control system of the entity. All right, that is what we meant by that. Now, and on the other side is strictly about the auditor. We are talking about the sampling and substantive testing. All right. If these things, if there is an inherent risk which the control process did not detect, the auditor should be able to spot it. Now, if the auditor is not able to spot it, then it means that whatever opinion that he will be giving might be wrong. And as such, there is a relationship between the risk of material misstatement and the detection risk. Okay, if control is good for the company, it means that the auditor doesn't need to really do much substantive testing. But if control is weak, then it means that it is not able to spot this inherent risk and also prevent them. That one will mean that the auditor has to expand his population sample and also increase his substantive testing. So that is a relationship that is between the two. Okay, so that was what we discussed majorly last week. And last week, we also talked about business risk. Okay. We talked about business risk. Now, business risk, I explained that anything that lets the image of the company, reputation, let the company come down in terms of their revenue, in terms of their reputation and everything. So I actually explained to you that when you are answering questions around business risk, you need to at least be able to spot financial issues. You see that things are going down for the entity. You need to be able to spot operational issues. You see that operationally, people are leaving the company, machine breakdown, and all those things. And we also talked about reputational issues. All right, reputational issues, i.e., where the company is not compliant, it can cause their image to come down. All right, so this is basically what we talked about. Although we also talked about the audit strategy, the audit plan, and audit documentation, and all those, the current part, the permanent part. Those are key knowledge things that you are supposed to know. Okay, and like I said, the auditor places reliance on the control. Okay, so if the control is strong, detection risk is down. All right, so he doesn't need to do plenty samples and substantive testing. All right, so that is what we did that. Now, today, my major focus is to help you deal with examination questions that embodies audit planning and risk assessment. Okay, that is my main focus to mute when we are not making any comments. It's very, very important because I record these things and I give it to you. If you're not making any contribution, kindly mute. If you want to contribute, just give me a sign, I will let you in. If I ask questions, you can unmute and you can also come out with your answers. It's very, very important. All right. So let's look at how you face your examination in terms of audit. Before anything, is there any question that you would want to ask concerning the class and what it comes to? Is there any question that anybody would want to ask as my board loads? Any question?
In fact, I was getting confused.
Which part of the question, please?
Question 2C, November 2021.
What was the question about? I'm not.
November 2021. The question was about they said you should explain 4 principal audit risk.
Yeah, that is what I'm speaking today. So you will actually understand it by the time I'm done today.
Okay, because when I was reading it and I realized that it seems it was more of a business risk than audit risk.
Yeah. So like I said, when you are okay, as we are going on, you appreciate it. So like I just explained to my friend Philip, you see, probably when to read the answers and you realize that it looks more of a business risk. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you is that so let's start. So what you realize after today's class is that, so I just explained to you that audit risk, when you are asked what audit risk, all right, that you can spot in a case, I explained to you that audit risk is equal to what? Risk of material misstatement plus detection risk. Okay.
Okay.
So if you are asked this question, then it means that you are going to talk about this part and this part. This part has in it inherent risk and also control risk. Okay, so it is the inherent risk and the control risk and the detection risk, all right, that makes an audit risk. You ask the question to spot the audit risk inside any case at all that has been given to you. then it means that we talk about 1, 2, and 3. All right. And I gave you an indication that when you are looking for anything inherently, it means you are going to talk about business rate. That is why probably you see like everything was business. So that is it. The clue to your inherent rate is coming from business rate. Okay. Then those about the control rate is coming from what? Internal control. Internal control is a topic in audit and assurance, the level 2 part. Okay. Then when it comes to inspection rate, then we are talking about auditors, the sampling, and the substantive testing. All right. So this is what it's about. You can add analytical procedures. Okay. So this is what the entire thing is about. Okay. So whatever you saw, okay. Yeah, whatever you saw, that thing you saw as business risk. Business risk is under risk of material misstatement. Okay, so that is why probably you saw plenty issues outlined using business risk. Is that
Okay. Yes, sir.
yeah?
Okay, so please I have a follow-up question.
Yes, go on.
Okay, so in the case of what Malik said, so if we are told to state are supposed to state 4 types of audit risk, so that would be the inherent, the control, detection, and then the business.
No. So this part of your exam is purely practical. All right. So it is practical, professional. What you are going to talk about, you don't say, okay, solution 1, inherent risk, 2, control risk. No. There are examples of business risk you are going to spot in the question. I think when we start dealing with, I have a question for you we are going to discuss, all right? When we start dealing with it, you appreciate it. But because of this, the time, I would want us to rejoin in another session, then we deal with that. And that is my major discussion for today. So I just explained to you that when you want to talk about business risk, look at financial aspects, right? So in the case, my friend, check if there are things of finance that is taking the company down, okay? Check if there are operational issues in the case that is taking the firm down. That can be a risk, all right? Check if there are reputational risk, all right? Now, this aspect, we are talking about internal control procedure. There are so many procedures. We have procedures about purchasing. You have procedures when you are writing checks, making payments. You have procedures about sales. All right. We have so many procedures about inventory. There is procedures, and these are where the standards come to play. And here, so when we rejoin, I will let us rejoin soon. You really appreciate it. Okay. So in your exams, you see the questions that you are likely to be faced in your exam, okay, are under audit risk only. Under audit risk only, the questions that you are likely to face, exam questions. Remember, I told you that this part is 25 marks. We have the planning and risk assessment, we have evidence, and we have finalization. Now, the question you are likely to face in your exam are number 1. The examiner will tell you that identify the business risk. The business risk associated with the company. So they will give you a case, right? And they will ask you to identify the business risk of the company. and also show how those business risks, how it might affect the financial statement, all right, or how those risks might relate to risk of material misstatement. That is the first type of question you get in there. Or you will see that number two, that they will ask you to identify the material misstatement associated with the company in the particular case. So I think this is the type that you saw, right? Confirm for me. You said that which paper was that? 2021 May.
November question 1C.
How was the question stated? So read it out for everybody to hear. And the last way they can ask you the question is also to identify the audit risk associated with the company, and how the auditor may take them. So these are the
Hello?
Yes.
The requirement of the question was explain 4 principal audit risks facing Agbelebe Limited.
All right. So you see, so this one will fall here. There's 3 types audit risk. So you see, per what we've done, it's either they isolate business risk, okay, which is inherent, or they isolate risk of material misstatement, which means that business risk is just about inherent, all right, like you've seen. But when they ask you risk of material misstatement, it means you need to include control risk. When they go to the next level of audit risk, then it means you need to include this third aspect, the detection. All right, so that is how you see. So never explain audit risk using these two without talking about the third part. You are wrong, because this is the mathematical equation for audit risk. If you talk about these two, you need to talk. So you see that I've stated they identify the audit risk, which is the 3 here. 1, 2, 3, and how the auditor may seek to address it. So if you talk about this 1, 2, the third one forms how the auditor will seek to address it. All right. So that is very, very, very important. So in this particular question that you have, probably there wasn't much cases in the company to comment on internal risk, but possibly, like you attested to, it was all about business risk. So at least you can identify things in these areas. All right. And when you are done, you need to talk about detection, how the auditor can detect it. And how the auditor can detect it comes through substantive testing and like stuff with the NS sampling. What was the marks allocated to that particular question?
10 marks.
10 marks. So you see, you are identifying 4 things for 10 marks. So you see, it's not as simple as that. So you identify at least things concerning these areas. All right. You may get some here, but also attach how the auditor can spot it. All right. We will deal with all the past questions. All right. So you don't worry. We will tackle this. But these are the ways you can be tested. Please take note of this thing that I've done here. It is very,
Okay.
very, 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 very important. These are how. Now I'm going to start by coming up with a question, and we are going to look at it. So please you will kindly join. Then we look at typical example of how you do it. There are any more questions before we wrap up this session and move on to the B part, where we actually examine ourselves? I'll welcome you in the B part of this session. Let's join in the same link.